What's going on YouTube? Username Kite562 here, and I have a review of Stephen King's Salem's Lot for you. Now just let me sit here and get the thumbnail. Anyway, let's get on with the video. Now, Salem's Lot, it's a quite bone-chilling tale in my opinion, and I finished it today, and I have to say I really quite enjoyed it as a reader, since this would be my fourth Stephen King book that I've ever read, and I really don't regret it. It really has a character of making things bone-chillingly terrifying and scary. The main premise of this story is that this plot revolves around vampires, and I don't mean the super sexy, sparkly, whatever kind of vampires are out there. I mean vampires that are actually terrifying. You know, like Anne Rice, just classic Nosferatu, Dracula, just long before they could sparkle and whatever, and they weren't all about sexiness and whatnot. But anyway, let's get on with my review. Now, this review will contain some mild spoilers within this review itself, but not enough to ruin it for new readers. This is just a retelling of my experiences with the book, so I thought I'd share it with you all. So anyway, as I said, with the first point, this is a vampire story set in the small town of Jerusalem's Lot, or Salem's Lot, known by the locals. Our main character is Ben Mears, who used to be a resident of Salem's Lot when he was like, I want to say 4 years old, 7. I don't really remember the details. So like somewhere between 4 to 7 years old, from my opinion. And Ben's a successful writer. One of his books was known as Air Dance. So then there was like another one, I just can't remember it off the top of my head. But I do know that one of his books was Air Dance. Now, as I said, this is a story about vampires, and this story has a really unique way of spreading the infection of vampirism upon this small, tiny town of Salem's Lot. Like, for example, you can get scratched or bit, not just sucked on by the neck, but just bit and then slowly turn over time. Or if you drink a vampire's blood when you're not bit, you become damned or unclean in the eyes of the church. Case in point would be Donald Callahan's situation, where he had to put his faith up against Kurt Barlow's faith, or lack thereof, since Kurt Barlow is the main baddies, or one of the main baddies. He's the big ancient vampire that lives in the house of Marsten's house. It has a history of horror and terror within it, and I just thought it was a really eerie place. Like, the house itself, like I said in The Shining, kind of had this living entity kind of feel to it, and it just drew in evil things. Like, for example, Huey Marsten, the guy who originally lived in the house, Huey, Hubert, whatever you want to call it, he hung himself within the closet of one of the bedrooms of the house because everybody thought he was a mobster, contract killer, something around those parts. And everybody would just gossip about it until he died. So, anyway. My next point is, I really like how well fleshed out the characters are. Now I'm going to focus on a golden trio of characters, or 4, I should say. That would be Father Callahan, the priest in this story, Ben Mears, our main character, our main protagonist, Mark Petrie, an avid horror fan, and he likes magician tricks. So Father Callahan, Ben, Mark Pierce, and then Dr. Jimmy Cody. Which I thought these 4 characters were really interesting. It's just there's a slew of them. You also have the love interest of Ben named Susan Norton, and she's a whole bundle herself, but I thought she was a really interesting and sweet character when the interactions that she had with Ben up at the lake when they were like having their quote-unquote little date thing. And I just thought that was really sweet. They end up meeting since Susan was reading his book Air Dance, and she kind of asked him out on a date. They first go out and to get a, root beer float or something at the local diner. I thought that was a really sweet moment. So, but all in all, this story itself is really fleshed out with its large and small characters to make it feel like a really alive place in town. And I have to say, one of my favorite moments from this book, there's a lot that I've written down on my phone, has to be the fight between Richie Bowden and Mark Petrie, since Mark ends up like twisting his arm and making him go to the ground and say uncle. I think he might have gotten him into like a backwards behind the hand police kind of grip, something like that. And just held on and just kept on pushing down on him. It was just a really great experience. So Richie Bowden ended up saying uncle to Mark's self-defense skills. So I just thought that was a really memorable moment for me as a reader. I mean, there's a lot on my notes here, so I'm more than happy to share them with you all. Anyway, Richard Throckett Stryker is Barlow's henchman, familiar within this story. So he kind of finds a way to like lure victims to the Marsten house. An example of this would be Ralphie Glick and then Danny Glick, their whole scenario that happens. And then I thought that was really interesting and really eerie because Stephen King really knows how to make children creepy. I mean, I saw the film, the original film from 1975 or 79. Let me know down in the comments below about that. I mean, I really enjoyed both entities of this story, and it's just a really fun tale of actually terrifying threats of vampires. This case of vampires is more like an unholy plague cast upon the town of Salem's Lot. Now, as I said, this thing starts out spreading like the flu, like with the person, I think his name was Dud, who was digging up Danny's grave, and then Dud ends up getting bit in the neck by a now vampirized Danny Glick, and then Dud makes his way to the bar or diner where Ben Mears and his teacher Mike Burke are talking about the Marsten house, and Dud is just sweating and just doesn't know, and he hasn't been able to sleep for weeks. Regular food doesn't satisfy his appetite, and he's just slowly turning into an undead entity. But I have to say, another part really caught my interest is the part where Matt Burke had Mike Rierson's corpse within his house, and he was found dead. Also, I think that might be Mike Rierson, the one who buried or dug up Danny again, and then Mike got bit. And it's a really confusing mess, but it's so much fun with this story. Like, you get moments from the townsfolk people of Salem's Lot. You get to see their whole little gossip spiel, and oh, it was just an absolutely delightful experience with this story. So anyway, point number 9. You can get bit and slowly turn over time, kind of almost like a zombie bite. So if you get bit, somebody has to kill you before you fully turn. So then that way you don't come back as an undead vampire. And I have to say, it's really interesting. Like, you get your typical vampire traits of like not being able to see the reflection, a craving for blood, and then But apparently in this story you can also float, especially when Susan Norton, spoiler alert, gets turned into a vampire by Barlow himself. And it was just really interesting. So I have to say, the most powerful scene for me in this book had to be the Faith versus Father Callahan and Kurt Barlow, and then Barlow ends up making Donald Callahan spiritually unclean by drinking Kurt Barlow's blood, and then Father Callahan tries to walk into the doors of his own church, but the doors end up zapping him away, ergo making him spiritually unclean, and then therefore leaving the town of Salem's Lot. So anyway, as I stated early on, you know, crosses, holy water, garlic, stake through the heart, you got to invite them in. But again, like with the situation of Matt Burke's situation with Mike Rierson when he was slowly turning into a vampire, Matt Burke revoked his invitation to him while he was in the guest bedroom, and Mike Rierson's body or corpse ends up getting yeeted out of the window. Like, he slowly backs up like this, hissing, and then he just gets yeeted as Matt Burke ends up revoking his invitation to him whilst holding up a crucifix. So that scene just was really well written to me and really opening to my mind as a reader. It's just, this whole story as a whole was a treat, an absolute delight to read. So, and I have to say, another powerful scene for me from the book is when Danny Glick ends up biting the neck of this infant named Randy McDougal. Like, it was just downright creepy. I mean, Stephen King really knocked it out of the park with these vampires. They are legitimately disturbing and terrifying, and their craving for blood just not stops, and their ranks just keep on going up and up and up, and then the risks just keep on going up, and then the body count just keeps on rising. It was just, whew, blew my mind out of the freaking water. So, and I have to say, the story itself is very solid and really enjoyable. And I have to say, my favorite quote from the book, from Kurt Barlow, is, "No closer, shaman, or I'll sever the boy's jugular and carotid before you even draw a breath, or your carotid artery, jugular." I cannot talk today. Your jugular and your carotid artery, as he was holding Mark Petrie by the scruff of his neck, and Kurt Barlow just ended up killing both of Mark's parents before him by crushing their skulls in, by knocking them together. It's just, Kurt Barlow is a one-man army, and he's one of the badass vampires I have ever seen written in literature. So, but I wonder who's higher above than Kurt Barlow. Like, I'm genuinely curious. So, anyway, that's my favorite quote from the book. "No closer, shaman, or I will sever the boy's jugular and carotid artery before you can draw a breath." And that's from page 536 of Salem's Lot. So anyway, my overall thoughts is that I really enjoyed this book, and I really enjoyed this story. Really solid. You can really visualize the elements within the book itself. So anyway, I give Stephen King's Salem's Lot a 9.3 out of 10. I really enjoyed it as a reader, and I look forward to reading more of Stephen King's work. I'll probably do a little bookshelf update. I'll probably do a little bookshelf update video for the month of June to show you how my bookshelf has vastly grown, but I'm really thankful for it. So yeah, I give Stephen King's Salem's Lot a 9.3 out of 10, and I'm definitely going to reread this maybe for the Halloween season, or like if I really want a scary vampire story to send shivers down my spine again. And I love this. I can't believe I lasted this long without reading another Stephen King's work all those years ago. So anyway, this is Kite562 signing out, and as always, I hope you have a wonderful day, everybody. Later.